Back here on CBS Sports HQ, the CFP rankings coming in as we speak right now. Back here with Richard Johnson and Brad Crawford. The biggest reveal here, Miami down 6 spots. Your reaction's what?
My reaction's they got it right.
Yeah.
I think Miami falls out of the bracket and they sit right at the edge and they are the first team out. I have Alabama in as the last team in at large in my personal bracket, and the committee has stacked it up thusly. You look at this Miami team, their best wins are against Duke and Louisville. They lost to Georgia Tech and they lost to Syracuse on Saturday. In a lot of their games, they don't really control the game, and we know that game control, as Brad will tell you, is something that the committee does factor in. It's part of their resume, and it's part of how they evaluate the teams. And when you get out of this top 5, top 6, and you get down to these 10, 11, 12 spots, it really is who you think is the better team, quite frankly. And I think Bama's the better team.
Brad, you saw Lane Kiffin's letter that he sent to everybody. It was, I have it right here. I mean, he laid it all out here. Ole Miss has 9 wins, outscoring their opponents. Alabama has 9 wins, outscoring their opponents 371. He went into detail, and now Miami falling allows Alabama to get in. What do you make of that?
Yeah, but if Clemson beats SMU, then the ACC gets 2 teams in and Alabama's out. That's a big takeaway tonight. And we said previously that if Miami was not in the top 11, here they are at 12, Miami's out too. So if the ACC is going to be a 2-bid league, and I think that's a good chance it will be, Clemson has to beat SMU. So Alabama fans right now have to root for SMU to, beat Clemson in Charlotte. But Miami justifiably is at 12. You can't have 0 ranked wins at the end of the year and expect to be inside that top 12, especially when you lost your last game. My big surprise here too is Ole Miss is still ahead of South Carolina despite losing to Kentucky. Just the worst loss of all these bubble teams.
Brad, you think if Clemson beats SMU by like 3 scores, that SMU's still in the field?
It won't be 3 scores. That spread's 2.5 for a reason. I think it'll be competitive. Now, if we do see Clemson, win in Charlotte 38-7, then Bama's probably in because SMU does not have any good wins either. I mean, there's three ACC teams in the mix, right? Clemson, SMU, and Miami, and none of those 3 have a ranked win. I thought Louisville might come in tonight to give one of those teams a ranked win. It didn't happen, so there's a chance the ACC still gets 2 in.
All right, the latest rankings are in. We will break them down next. Plenty of reaction coming in. Ohio State dropping to 6. We'll break it down next here on CBS Sports HQ. Keep it locked. The penultimate college football playoff rankings, and here's a look at the projected bracket. We've got a new look. In the first round, Arizona State out of the Big 12 taking on Penn State. You'd have to think that they lost the Big 10 championship. Tennessee and Ohio State, so Ohio State, even with the loss to Michigan, projected to host a first-round playoff game against the Vols. Alabama and Notre Dame, we've seen them before in the playoffs with Alabama winning big. Indiana and Georgia, that would be fun in between the hedges as you see Boise State and SMU get those first-round buys out of the Mountain West and the ACC. Back here with CBS Sports college football writer Richard Johnson and 24/7 Sports college football analyst Brad Crawford. Ohio State falls to 6. I thought they would fall further down, maybe 7 or 8. They're still hosting a playoff game, which is what Brad projected. He predicted. How about that first-round matchup between Ohio State and Tennessee? I think the only time they ever matched up was in 1996 at like the Citrus Bowl. So that would be fun to see in Columbus, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably give Dylan Sampson 35 carries if that game's snowy. Tennessee is not used to that, man, in the SEC. That's one of the most exciting first-round games, undoubtedly. And then Indiana, going on the road and playing Georgia. Everybody in the world is going to take Georgia in that game, but we know Indiana has a legit offense. So I'm excited to see this thing shake out, man.
What's your initial reaction after seeing the bracket, seeing the rankings?
Well, first of all, I'm actually a little surprised Ohio State is still going to host. I thought Ohio State would be punished for a bad loss against Michigan and that they would drop out of the hosting seats, but they do still sit in there. I think that's really interesting. You see how much they value Ohio State, how much they value Ohio State's win over Penn State, and how much they value Ohio State's win over Indiana and their loss against Oregon. It's a good loss, Hakeem.
So Ohio State down to 6. Right now projected to host Tennessee in the first round. In terms of where Notre Dame is at, they are still below Penn State. You're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think Penn State being just a notch above. Notre Dame has the worst loss of any team in this field, of any team with a prayer of getting into this field, with whatever the heck it is we call what happened against Northern Illinois in September. I do think Penn State is just a notch better.
Well, Notre Dame's also beaten Texas A&M, which is Texas's best win. They've beaten Georgia Tech, who just beat Miami and almost beat Georgia, probably should have beaten Georgia. So Notre Dame has won 10 straight games. I think they're a legitimate, team right now that can not only win a first-round home game, but can beat a conference champion in round 2 as well. Notre Dame has been undervalued, I think, the last couple weeks. Richard, you mentioned how bad the NIU loss is. It really is. Marcus Freeman, though, and that team has played well with his back against the wall for the last 2 months. And like I said, 10-game winning streak in the playoff. Notre Dame's a team right now that I think is being undervalued a bit.
How long have all of us done this, and Notre Dame gets to fly under the radar? I mean, that's what's happening here. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish get to fly under the radar. And I agree with Brad. That's a really, really good football team. I think Penn State's a notch above, but Notre Dame is right there. I don't think Penn State's really head and shoulders over the Irish. But, yeah, how about Notre Dame sneaking around the chicken coop a little bit? I think it's crazy.
Notre Dame is second in FBS with a plus 315 point differential, behind only Indiana, plus 344. When you beat a team by 66, your point differential is going to go up. You see Indiana at 9. Do you think that's where they should be? Is that respectful to them?
Yeah, I think that's right it. Indiana did one of two things that good teams do. Indiana smoked bad teams. That's the first part. Now, they didn't beat the good team that they played, Ohio State. That's the second part. They weren't able to get that done, but they still deserve to be in this field because, like you saw on Saturday against Purdue, that Indiana team can still take care of business. And if that Indiana team had a different insignia on the side of the helmet, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, Hakeem.
Yeah, I think Indiana's a whole lot like Ole Miss. They both have star quarterbacks, Curtis Warwick and Jackson Dart, very good defensive lines, except Indiana took care of business in games that it should have. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky and Florida. That's why Ole Miss is not inside this top 11 right now. Indiana, I think, is a legit team at number 9, and that's a team that I don't want to play in the first round because they're 11-1 for a reason, and like Richard mentioned, they've blown out just about everybody they've played. That Ohio State game, by the way, was closer than the final score indicated. Indiana is not a bad team at all.
Well, the team right in front of Indiana is SMU. They are projected to get a bye out of the ACC. They'll play Clemson for the ACC championship on Saturday night. Look, I don't know if most of the country knows how good SMU is. They're top 5 in points per game, 39 points per game in FBS. Rhett Lashley and the Mustangs, they can get up and down the field, and I know Clemson can score as well. But SMU has a chance to make a mark here and get that first-round bye, Richard.
I'll give SMU this. They fixed what was broken, particularly on the offense. They were doing a little quarterback roulette, Preston Stone, Kevin Jennings, Preston Stone. They go with Kevin Jennings at the end of September, and then they start rolling. So that shaky game in week 0 against Nevada, that's behind them. That loss against BYU close, that's behind them. But Brad Crawford and I disagree. Because I think if SMU goes out there this weekend and loses to Clemson, I don't think they're in. I think SMU falls out because SMU would have lost to the only 2 good teams on their schedule, which would be Clemson and BYU. And I look at this resume and Pitt, I mean, Louisville's a fine team, but that's it as far as who SMU has beaten, Brad.
I think SMU can afford a loss, but it can't afford to lay an egg. If they get blown out by Clemson, then you're right. SMU's probably out of the playoff. But the committee has shown that they love these double-digit win teams, especially if you got 11. Right now, SMU has 11. Indiana has 11. Miami has 10. That's why Miami's out right now. So I think it's very interesting to kind of watch this ACC championship game. That's probably the most important conference championship game outside of the Mountain West when Boise State and UNLV get together. Clemson, SMU is probably a two-bid league if it's a close game and Clemson wins.
Brad, we have this bracket. The penultimate rankings are out here. You've seen the bracket. You've seen the rankings. Could this be the final rankings? Could what we're looking at here, because based on the projection, you would have Texas winning the SEC championship, SMU winning the ACC championship, Oregon winning the Big Ten title, Boise State winning the Mountain West. So Penn State is the 5 seed, Arizona State the lowest ranked conference championship at the 12 seed. Tennessee, Ohio State, there's not going to be any movement there. Alabama, Notre Dame, there's not going to be any movement there. In Indiana and Georgia, Georgia apparently would lose the SEC title game. So this could be our final bracket. Do you think that there will be any changes come Sunday?
These are the 12 teams that I think will be in the playoff, regardless of, well, if Clemson beats SMU, obviously Clemson's in. I still think SMU's in. But that UNLV Boise State game is the one that I have circled. I think Boise State can lose that game, and UNLV gets in as the G5 champion, and Boise State's out. But right now, I feel pretty confident that these are the 12 teams that we're going to see, and Alabama fans should be pretty happy tonight that they're the last team in.
I completely agree on the UNLV point, by the way, that Brad makes. UNLV is a good football team, and UNLV pushed this Boise team when they played
in October.
In October, yes.
Lost by 5.
They pushed that team. They can beat this Boise team. And so if it happens, yes, I agree with Brad. If it happens, you're sending BYU as your G5 entrant. I think Tulane would have had something to say about that, but then you go out and lose to Memphis last weekend, and there goes your case. Yeah,
plus they're playing Army in the American Athletic Conference, and you know that we root for Army around here. Okay?
Better stop that triple option.
Okay, those are facts.
Notre Dame sure did.
See? So when you look at this bracket, Richard, and you take a look at these 12 teams, did the committee get it right this week?
Yes, this week I think they got it right with the 12 teams in. I don't think you can boot SMU or either of the ACC teams before they've played, right? Clemson, obviously, the other ACC team that gets automatically in if they win the league. By the way, that's a good thing about this format. It should preserve the conference championship games. That ACC conference championship game has a lot of meaning because Clemson can back into this field. I think it's just a really interesting case. And where would Clemson be if they won the game? Right? I don't know. Would Clemson be 12? Would Clemson be 11?
That's what I think. Yeah.
I don't know where you slot Clemson in if they win the ACC championship game.
Yeah, probably Clemson would be 12, I would think. I don't think the ACC is going to get one of those top 4 bids unless it's SMU. But my biggest surprise tonight, I don't think the committee got this right. I thought South Carolina should be the last team in because what they've shown now with Ohio State's loss to Michigan, we mentioned how bad the NIU loss was for Notre Dame. Ohio State was at home against a team that they should have beaten by 3 touchdowns. Then South Carolina goes on the road and beats Clemson to finish 6-0 their last 6 games, one of 5 teams nationally to finish unbeaten in November. What we've seen is you can lose now once or twice in November like Bama has done, losing to Oklahoma by 3 touchdowns. Oklahoma's a 6-6 football team. I'm just surprised that the committee did not respect South Carolina more than it did and has them behind Alabama, Miami, and Ole Miss tonight.
Wouldn't you argue that Ole Miss, of those three-loss SEC teams, don't they have the better resume?
I don't think so.
You don't?
Personally, I stack the 3 of them, Alabama, South Carolina.
Because I just want to give you the context. And Lane Kiffin laid it out. We checked his work. He was not incorrect. In the 3 losses, Ole Miss was outscored 76-30. In the 3 losses, Alabama was outscored 88-55. Common opponents both beat Georgia. The Rebels won by 18, Bama won by 7. They both beat South Carolina. The Rebels won by 24, Bama won by 2. Alabama beat LSU by 29. Ole Miss lost to LSU by 3 in overtime. Ole Miss beat Oklahoma by 12. Alabama lost to Oklahoma by 21. When you look at those points, and those are just statistics, that's not Lane putting any sort of extracurricular opinion in there. Just look at those.
I think they're just numbers. There is a convenient omission.
Okay, then what is the omission?
The convenient omission is that you lost to Kentucky, LSU, and a Florida team that is mid. That portfolio of losses.
You're saying Florida finished 7-6?
That is my dear alma mater, and that is a mid football team, all right? They've had a nice end to the season, and they finished on the right foot. But let's not pretend the Florida Gators are a bunch of world beaters right now, all right? We saw what they did. I mean, go back to week 1 against Miami. They got the doors blown off. So it is convenient that Lane Kiffin is leaving off their portfolio of losses. That's why I have Alabama and South Carolina stacked above them. And Brad, my question for you is this about South Carolina specifically. Are they sort of kind of parsing the losses here? Are they saying that Alabama's losses to Tennessee and Vandy close, and then even though they have an Oklahoma, getting blown out by Oklahoma, those losses are better than Carolina's losses, which are Ole Miss, LSU, and Alabama, because obviously South Carolina lost to Alabama.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. I mean, we talk about bad losses. Ole Miss lost at home to a Kentucky team that South Carolina beat on the road 31-6. Bama lost at Vanderbilt 40-35. South Carolina and Nashville, they won 28-7. Bama lost 24-3 at Oklahoma. South Carolina and Norman won 35-9. So common opponents here, South Carolina owns the two teams they lost to head-to-head. I think the committee is significantly weighing head-to-head this season more than they ever have. And to me, like I said, South Carolina's hot streak, they've just kind of overlooked it. I mean, Louisville beat Clemson a couple weeks ago and moved from unranked to 16. South Carolina does it and goes from 15 to 14. That makes sense.
How do we look? I guess my question here is, we look at Notre Dame, right? They lost to Northern Illinois. Worst loss in the country, you said, Richard. They've won 10 in a row. South Carolina, Brad, has won 6 in a row. So how do we weigh these winning streaks to the end of the season?
I don't think you weigh them.
Okay.
You are taking a full portfolio of what you do from week 1 to week 15. And I don't think it matters in what order you do it in. One of the smartest things I think the committee does is that they re-rank every week. They start from 0 every week.
You're right.
And when they do that, it doesn't matter the sequencing and the order of when you're winning and losing these games. It just matters when I stack it up next to each other, how they stack.
So there's no value to going on a hot streak, Brad. We can't have that in the playoff. So if you win 6 in a row to start the season and then maybe you lose 1 rest of way, don't you look at that a little bit different?
You know what the hot streak is? The hot streak is Oregon 12-0. There's your hot streak.
Well, they're the #1 team.
There's your hot streak.
They're in no matter what. We know that.
To me, and Brad, I don't know how you feel about this, but to me, I don't think the streaks matter.
Okay.
I just don't weigh those right now. I want your full portfolio. I want your full body of work.
If the streaks don't matter, then we've got to stop calling this thing the 12 best teams, because South Carolina is one of the 12 best teams in the country right now. They've shown it the last 6 weeks. And I think any national media member and anybody who's not in that committee room will probably say the same thing. Even Bama fans right now will tell you this Bama team is probably not playoff worthy. But here we are again. Bama has the head-to-head over South Carolina, and the committee took the path of least resistance, which a lot of us, including myself, thought they would.
And that's, you want to talk about streaks? We want to talk about full body of work? At the end of the day, Alabama gets to rest on the laurels of having beaten that South Carolina team. It happened when South Carolina was a differently constituted team. I understand that. Just like Notre Dame's terrible loss to Northern Illinois was when Notre Dame was a differently constituted team. Just like SMU's loss to BYU was when SMU was a differently constituted team, when they hadn't figured themselves out. But I don't know what you do with that. To me, I think it's a full body of work that includes Alabama having beaten South Carolina on the field. And that head-to-head looms large.
Well, Alabama is a brand, and this is a product, and that's also in play here as you look at the expanded playoff field, and Alabama is in, and Miami right now is out. Still ahead, conference championship week. Who's going to reign supreme in their conference? Picks and analysis coming up here on CBS Sports HQ. Back here on CBS Sports HQ, here's a look at the projected playoff bracket. Arizona State traveling to Happy Valley to play the Nittany Lions. We've been saying it all month long. Well, December just started, but you know what I'm saying. The last 5 weeks we've been saying it. Put that game at night, please, in Beaver Stadium. Tennessee traveling to Columbus to play Ohio State, Alabama, and Notre Dame. I would make the Fighting Irish a 6.5-point favorite in that game. I don't have my own book or anything like that, but that's what I would do. Indiana traveling to Georgia, and you see SMU and Boise State getting the byes, as well as Oregon and Texas in the latest college football playoff projection. All right, back here with Richard Johnson and Brad Crawford here to talk winners and losers. And I think it's pretty clear who the biggest winner is from tonight's CFP rankings is...
Death, taxes, and the Alabama Crimson Tide in the college football playoff. The nuclear winter will come for us all, and Alabama will remain. Because the Tide are in the field. I do agree with it, as we've talked about on the show today. I do agree with it. I have Bama in my personal field, and the committee agrees. And the Tide have found a way to put that full body of work in. And Hakeem,
yes,
every Tuesday night we get on this show and I bring up the fact that Missouri is still ranked. And you laugh at me and you say, why am I bringing that up?
Yeah, why are you bringing that up?
It's not a top line takeaway. Missouri being ranked at number 19, I'm telling you, it counts for Alabama because it's a ranked win. And Alabama shut that Missouri team out at home. So Bama, if we're parsing these things as closely as we're parsing with Miami and Ole Miss and South Carolina like that, Alabama gets the boost because for some reason, this committee is in love with the Missouri team that I personally do not think should be ranked in the top 25.
Alabama is definitely the big winner tonight. I mean, it shows that in week 13, you can have a 3-interception game and lose by 3 touchdowns as a 14-point road favorite, still getting the playoff. And then you beat Auburn, a team that's not going to bowl season, and you move up in the rankings because you're Alabama, right? That's why. So unlike Richard, I don't have Alabama in my final top 12. I do not think Bama is one of the 12 best teams in the country. But we're going to see that later this month. If Bama does play Notre Dame on the road, I think that gets corrected. And then the conversation becomes, well, should Ole Miss, Miami, or South Carolina have been that last team in?
Personally, I do not think what you do when you get in the dance has anything to do really with whether you belong in the dance or not. I think they're separate things, but I do agree with Brad that Notre Dame would probably make quick work of Alabama, to be honest with you.
Alabama only missed 2 out of the 10 previous college football playoffs. They made 8 of the 10. So they're in the expanded field. You just know it. And their strength of schedule. Look, we showed the resume. I get it. I understand. I understand why they're in. But I also understand the argument for South Carolina. I understand the argument for Ole Miss as well. But I get it. I get it. A 3-loss team, Alabama into the college football playoff. All right, now let's talk losers. Richard, who is your biggest loser from the latest rankings?
My loser is Miami. I think Miami thought, and they've been politicking, like because we have double-digit wins, we still deserve to be in the dance. But the committee has just shown that, no, you're on the outside looking in. Every week, it did feel like Miami was kind of getting away with it. Yeah, they had a big win against Wake, but they struggled for a lot of that game. Had a big win against Duke. They struggled for a lot of that game. And then obviously it caught up with them against Georgia Tech, and it caught up with them against Syracuse on Saturday. And when your best win sits there and it's Louisville, and that's all we could speak of, maybe you count Duke if you want to be really charitable. I have Miami out of the dance, and the committee does too.
Yeah, my biggest loser is South Carolina. They were number 15 last week. They go on the road, beat number 12 Clemson, and they move up 1 spot. Why? Because a couple of the teams ahead of them, they lost 2 head-to-head. You see Lenore Sellers there. He's probably college football's best quarterback in November, and now we're not going to get a chance to see him in the expanded playoff. Meanwhile, the team that got in over South Carolina, Alabama, Jalen Milroe has 6 turnovers his last 3 or 4 starts. So, you know, right now the hottest team in football, South Carolina, is not going to get in, and it looks like the Gamecocks are going to get a Citrus Bowl bid instead of getting the playoff.
Hey, somebody's going to get left out. Got to win more games, right?
I will say this. Beauty of this format is we're having this conversation about South Carolina. South Carolina got to have an extra meaningful end to their season. It's not just that South Carolina won all those games, they beat Clemson, which is obviously always huge, and then we forget about them and they go to a bowl game we don't care about. That may be their fate, but we talked about them legitimately as a college football playoff entrant. And that basically came out of nowhere. That is a good byproduct of this format, whether South Carolina gets in or not. And I know that's cold comfort to South Carolina fans if they don't get in. But as someone who observes this, I like being able to consider South Carolina, quite frankly, for the last 2 months as we have.
Well, Shane Beamer has been building something real special there at South Carolina. One of the fun teams to watch here down the stretch, but right now they are out of the field, winners and losers here on CBS Sports HQ. Coming up, it's Conference Championship Week. Who has the most to gain? We've got picks and analysis next on CBS Sports HQ. It's Conference Championship Week as we take a look at the games on the schedule. Ashton Genty and Boise State took on UNLV in the Mountain West Championship. Iowa State, Arizona State playing for the Big 12 title. Georgia clashing with Texas for the second time this season. Dogs beat the Longhorns in October. Oregon and Penn State battling in the Big 10 Championship, a game you can see 8 Eastern on CBS, streaming live on Paramount Plus on Saturday night. Set it up and break it down. Welcome in CBS Sports college football writer Richard Johnson and 24/7 Sports college football analyst Brad Crawford. Start in Idaho, where Boise State plays host to UNLV in a rematch of last year's Mountain West Championship. Most recent matchup was in October. Broncos beat the Rebels by 5. Ashton Genty didn't have his best game. They still won. Boise State has won 8 straight against UNLV. They're 3.5-point favorites on Friday, Richard. Is it rinse and repeat for Boise State?
I'm picking Boise. I'm plugging my nose and picking Boise. This UNLV team can beat Boise State, though. I think they showed a little bit of a blueprint, but how to get Ashton Genty on the ground and limit the damage, not stop, but limit. And they also popped some huge plays on offense that they actually weren't able to cash in on in the first half of that game, and it's the reason why they lost. So I'm picking Boise. And I don't love it, Hakeem. I really don't.
I do. I like Boise State. Brad, do you like Boise State?
Nah, this is my one money line upset of the weekend. I like UNLV because Boise State has a tremendous amount of pressure on this game. They know they are carrying the G flag torch right now. Ashton Genty, by the way, has a chance. If he has 200-plus yards, he might steal some first-place Heisman votes away from Travis Hunter, who's not playing this weekend. But I think UNLV has some unfinished business, man. Barry Odom right now might be coaching his final game with UNLV, too, if he takes one of these big, power openings. So I like UNLV on the road to beat Boise State and get that G5 playoff bid.
A little bit of chaos there. With a win, Boise State would likely get a bye in the playoff. SMU also in play for a bye, taking on Clemson in the ACC Championship. Mustangs playing in the ACC title game in their first year in the conference. SMU, 5th highest scoring team in FBS, averaging 39 points per game. The spread is 2.5 in favor of SMU. Richard, you rolling with the Mustangs?
I'm taking the Ponies because I don't think Clemson can keep up on offense. I think SMU is going to come out here and just put a number on the board that I don't think the Tigers can stick with. Now, look, Clemson's a good team on defense, especially as we know, but I do think Kevin Jennings is another animal. We just saw what a mobile quarterback in Lenore Sellers can do to this Clemson defense. You can have it schemed up, you can have it fit up right, and a special player can still make a special play. That's why I take SMU in this game.
I like Clemson plus 2.5 in this game. Clemson's used to playing in Charlotte. They've won more than half a dozen ACC championships at that venue under Dabo Swinney, and here we go. SMU does not have a ranked win this season. Clemson slightly more battle-tested, I would say, having played Georgia and now South Carolina bookended that season. And the Tigers have new blood, man. I mean, this is a chance. Dabo Swinney said it today. They can run the table and still win the national championship. That ain't going to happen, but they might win Saturday night.
What did Dabo say? Their first 15-0 team to win a national championship. They could be the first 9-3 team to win a national championship. All right, Dabo.
So far right now, Brad and Richard on opposite sides. The ACC could be a 2-bid conference in the playoff. Could be. Same can't be said for the Big 12. Arizona State against Iowa State in the Big 12 championship. Consider the Fighting Kenny Dillinghams were picked to finish last in the Big 12 preseason poll. Here they are playing for the title, a 7-win turnaround. And speaking of 7, Iowa State won its first 7 games this season, lost back-to-back games, losing their grip in the standings, but finished strong, winning their last 3. Cyclones, Sun Devils playing in Jerry's World. Who you got, Richard?
I heard all that stuff about hot streaks and nothing about those smoking hot Arizona State Sun Devils. I am taking Arizona State in this game to cover and to win. Sam Levitt goes, and if Sam Levitt's playing, I'm taking him because I think Sam Levitt's got a little something to him, and that doesn't even say anything about Cam Scatterbo and what the Sun Devils have around Sam Levitt.
We're the same here. Arizona State -2.5. I think they win that game. Arizona State has been the most consistent Big 12 football team this season, and that's been hard because parity abound in that conference. I thought Colorado would be in this game. Didn't happen. Iowa State's there, but this is where the streak comes to an end for Iowa State. Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham, he moves one step closer to winning National Coach of the Year as the Big 12 champion.
All right, there you go. Fear the fork for both Brad and Richard. We've got a regular season rematch in the SEC championship. Georgia beat Texas in October. Tough to beat a team twice in the same season. The Longhorns are 2.5-point favorites, opened as 1.5-point favorites. Virtual home game for the Dogs in Atlanta, but Texas will travel, Richard. Does Texas avenge the loss and win the SEC in their first season in the conference?
Yes, they do. I think Texas showed me on Saturday night against A&M that it doesn't matter, even if they don't have Kelvin Banks, their standout left tackle, they can still run the heck out of the ball. Even if they're down to running back, I don't know how much, because that has been a decimated running back room via injury. So I am taking Texas in this game. Texas is going to win. Texas is going to cover, because I also think the unsung part of the Longhorns this year, frankly, has been that defense. A&M, 0 offensive touchdowns on Saturday night. We know Georgia has struggled on offense throughout this season. I take the Longhorns.
This could be the second of 3 matchups between these two teams that we see. We may see it later this month in the second round of the playoffs, too. I think Texas wins this initial rematch and wins the SEC championship in Sark's first season in the SEC. This Texas defense right now is playing great, and Georgia, frankly, does not scare me offensively. Carson Beck, we don't know which version of him is going to show up. They don't really have a strong running game right now. And at wideout, Georgia is struggling to find that elite go-to playmaker. And we saw what Georgia Tech did in Athens. They pushed them around on both sides of the ball, scoring 42 points during that loss. So I think Georgia's coming in a little bit banged up. Maybe Georgia wins the rubber match here in a couple weeks, but Texas wins Saturday in Atlanta.
All right, Big Ten title game was supposed to be a rematch between Oregon and Ohio State, but the Buckeyes got upset by Michigan, so Penn State is the beneficiary, facing undefeated Oregon, the #1 team in the nation, a 3.5-point favorite in Indianapolis. Richard, can the Nittany Lions disrupt Dylan Gabriel and the Ducks?
I see 3 points, and I see a hook, so I'm taking the hook.
Okay.
Penn State covers. Penn State covers.
Covers.
Close game against Ohio State for both of these teams. Oregon was able to prevail, stole a possession on an onside kick, 1 by 1. Penn State was not able to get the job done on the goal line on 2 separate possessions and fall to Ohio State. The gulf between these two teams is not that big. I know Oregon is an undefeated team, and I know the eggs that Penn State has laid in these huge spots where they gotta have it against great teams. I think Penn State plays this close enough to cover. I do think Oregon wins the game, though.
Yeah, you want me to tell you what that is?
Talk to me.
Penn State is 1-13 against top 5 opponents under James Franklin. They've lost 11 straight.
Whew.
The last one was to Ohio State.
You can cover and still lose.
Yes, right. You can cover. You can cover,
That
but you
makes
can't
me
win.
feel better about taking Oregon to not only win, but cover. Thank you very much for that stat.
You're
before
welcome.
This segment. I appreciate that. Yeah. No, I think Oregon gets a late goal line stand. Unless Tyler Warren gets, 14 catches for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in the red zone, I don't think Penn State wins this game. Still a very good football team. Very, very nice under James Franklin this year. But Oregon moves to 13-0 and gets that coveted top seed in this first expanded playoff.
Yeah, there better not be a goal line situation with Penn State and they don't throw the ball to Tyler Warren like what happened against Ohio State.
Or you can hand off to him, too.
Yeah, you can hand off to, right.
My question for this is, Brad, if Penn State loses this game, do they fall out of the hosting seeds behind Ohio State? Sitting there, I believe Ohio State is 6th in these rankings. Do they sit behind Ohio State because of their head-to-head loss, or do they still host in Happy Valley next on the 21st?
Now, Ward Manuel said a couple of weeks ago that he would not necessarily, the committee that is, penalize teams, for losing a conference championship game. And by the way, he works at Michigan, who just beat Ohio State. Penn State's going to host. If they lose to Oregon Saturday night, they are going to host, and Ohio State might be knocked a little bit back. But no, I think if you're a Nittany Lion fan right now, no need to worry. playing with house money. At worst, you get a first-round home game.
Oregon can become the 6th team to defeat Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in the same season. Previous 5 instances, the same team, Michigan State. How about that for a fun fact? Richard Johnson, Brad Crawford here on CBS Sports HQ. And you can watch the Big Ten Championship game Saturday night, 8 Eastern on CBS and streaming live on Paramount Plus. We'll have pregame, halftime, and postgame coverage right here on CBS Sports HQ. Coming up, a full bracket breakdown. Emory Hunt fills out his bracket. Oregon is the favorite to win the Natty, but are the Ducks the favorites in his bracket? That's next on CBS Sports HQ. The penultimate college football playoff rankings are in, and here's a look at the projected bracket. A thing of beauty as you take a look at the first-round matchups. Tennessee traveling to Columbus to play Ohio State. Arizona State visiting Happy Valley. Make that a night game, please. Indiana and Georgia in the first round, and Alabama and Notre Dame in South Bend. As you take a look at the bracket, the top 5 conference champs earning automatic bids, with the 4 highest-ranked teams receiving a first-round bye. 11 games to be played in all, culminating with the national championship in Atlanta. It's time for bracket breakdown, and let's welcome in former Louisiana running back Emory Hunt here. Let's start in Happy Valley. Penn State would host Arizona State, so you got Cam Scadaboo against Tom Allen's stifling defense. Is this a bracket buster?
It is not. It'll be a fantastic game, though, but I do love Penn State's defense in this matchup. They'll slow down the run game and force Arizona State to throw the football more than they want to. And for that reason, I like Penn State to win a playoff game and move on to the next round.
All right, I like that. Got Penn State moving on. The projected 8-9 game features Ohio State against Tennessee and Columbus. Many thought perhaps the Buckeyes wouldn't host a first-round playoff game, but here they are hosting the Vols. Who's moving on?
Well, listen, this is a contrast in styles. You have the spread offense of Tennessee, and unbeknownst to many people, Tennessee can run the football. And this is going to be a great test for Oregon in how they can stop the run, how they can defend the pass. So they'll be challenged in this ball game. And I do like that Ohio State has that taste, a bad loss against Michigan, hanging in their mouths right now. I do like the Buckeyes to take care of business with an emphatic win against Tennessee and move on to the next round.
All right, we'll get to that matchup in a moment. Down the bracket, Alabama visiting Notre Dame. I would make Notre Dame like a 6-point favorite, 6.5-point favorite. Who do you like in this game?
It's hard for me to ignore what I saw last, and I saw a dominating performance for Notre Dame on the ground from both sides of the line of scrimmage. The run defense and stopping the run, which is going to be key versus Alabama, and also their ability to run the football and dictate the terms. This is a 3-headed monster. If you count the quarterback, it's a 4-headed monster. They'll control the tempo, the pace. They're great on defense. Alabama's a little bit too inconsistent, so I do like Notre Dame to move on to round number 2.
Yeah, Notre Dame's defense will just absolutely wreak havoc against Jalen Milroe, perhaps, in a projected game there. 10-seed Indiana against the 7-seed Georgia. Who advances there?
This game is being played in Athens. We saw what that looked like against Georgia Tech. I'm not saying, but I'm saying. Things get weird down there in Georgia, but I do like this game to be as entertaining as Arizona State and Penn State. But Georgia's defense, I feel like, can pose some of the same problems Indiana faced against Ohio State. So I do like the Bulldogs to eke out a win. I like their defense more so than anything because I can trust their defense week in, week out. Bulldogs move ahead.
All right, now let's move to the quarterfinals. Penn State against Boise State. Who advances there?
This is a great game, man. Here's the thing. Penn State can stop the run, and we know they're balanced on offense. I feel like a little bit that Boise State is one-dimensional in their approach. If you stop Ashton Genty or if you slow him down, you have a shot. I feel like Penn State does have a shot to do that, and it becomes a Drew Allen versus Maddox-Matson game. I like Penn State in that matchup.
All right, so Penn State moving on to face the winner of Oregon State and Oregon, which we thought we were going to get in the Big Ten Championship. So here they are meeting again. The rematch. Does Ohio State avenge that loss? Emory, you still with me? Does Ohio State avenge the loss to Oregon and move on to play Penn State?
You heard me the first time. They don't move on. All game. I like their offense. I like their quarterback play a little bit better, and I move them over to the next round.
All right, keep moving through the bracket. Notre Dame against SMU, two of the highest scoring teams in FBS. Who you got here in your bracket?
Imagine if Miami had defense. They beat SMU. It's the same type of offense. They can score, but they can play defense. It's a tougher task for Notre Dame, but one that I do feel like the Fighting Irish can handle. I like them to win this one against SMU.
All right, so Notre Dame moving on. The last quarterfinal matchup, Georgia against Texas for what could be a third time. So who wins the trilogy?
Oh, my goodness, man. It's wild. We've seen this game played 3 times already in this particular scenario. But in this scenario, Texas gets their lick back once again because I feel like they'll win in the SEC title game. So I like Texas to knock off Georgia. Texas's defense will be ready for the challenge this time around. They won't let go of the rope. The offensive line won't. I like the Longhorns to move on.
All right, now to the semifinals. Penn State against Oregon for the second time. So it's a rematch of the Big Ten championship here. Who's playing for the Natty, Penn State or Oregon?
Oregon will play for the national championship. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't beat themselves. And I can trust them in a bigger game, more so than I can a Penn State football team. So for me, Oregon will be playing for the national title.
All right, in the other semifinal, it's Notre Dame against Texas. We got massive brands here. Who is moving on to play the Ducks in Atlanta?
Talk about a fight at the line of scrimmage, Hakeem. This will be a physical battle on offense and on defense. And for those reasons, you move out to, okay, which quarterback can you trust? Well, both quarterbacks would have been battle tested by this point in the playoffs, but I do like Notre Dame. I like how they're playing. This team seems like to be a team of destiny. I moved the Irish to the national title game against Oregon.
Wow, Notre Dame coming into the playoff on a 10-game winning streak as they get to the national championship after losing to Northern Illinois. Who would have thought that could ever happen? Oregon trying to complete a perfect season. Who is winning it all?
Look back to 1988, man, and there's your answer. It's Notre Dame. Shout out to Rocket Ismail. Shout out to Tony Rice. Shout out to Chris Zorich. I think Notre Dame in this matchup against Oregon will do what they wanted to do all season long. Just dominate you at the point of attack. Marcus Freeman gets that national championship before he goes on and takes that Bears head coaching job.
So Notre Dame, your national champion, according to Emory Hunt, the Fighting Irish win it all in the first year of the expanded playoff. How about that? From losing to Northern Illinois to winning the Natty. Emory Hunt with his bracket breakdown here on CBS Sports HQ. How about that? What? Seriously? All right. I guess I can get behind that. Notre Dame plus 800 to win the national championship. As you take a look at the odds to win the national title, Oregon is the favorite. Oregon has never won a national championship, looking to do so as they enter the college football playoff. And they'll be playing against Penn State this Saturday on CBS for the Big Ten championship. The first round of the college football playoff begins with one game on Friday, December 20th, followed by 3 games on Saturday, the 21st. 11 games to be played, culminating with the national championship in Atlanta on January 20th.